Before the ocean had coastlines, before it knew where to stop, humans lived on land that no satellite has ever photographed. Today, that land is not ruined, not buried, simply erased, as if it was never meant to be remembered. At the end of the last ice age, the planet was still adjusting to a warmer reality. Ice sheets that had dominated the northern hemisphere for tens of thousands of years began to retreat, releasing unimaginable volumes of water back into the oceans. But this melting did not just raise sea levels. It reshaped geography itself, turning continents inside out and quietly deleting entire worlds in the process. One of those worlds lay across what is now the continental shelf of Southeast Asia. Today, it is broken into islands: Indonesia, Malaysia, Borneo. But once, this was a single vast landmass known as the Sunda Shelf. It was not coastal, it was inland. Rivers longer than the modern Danube crossed it. Rainforests stretched uninterrupted for thousands of kilometers, and humans lived deep inside it, far from any ocean. What makes this place extraordinary is not that people lived there, but that they stayed. For generations, Sunda was stable. Sea levels were low, climate patterns were predictable. The land supported large animal populations and dense plant life. Archaeological evidence suggests humans did not merely pass through, they adapted to it, exploiting forest resources, navigating rivers, and forming long-term habitation zones. This was not a fringe environment, it was a center. Then, without ceremony, the water began to move. Unlike sudden catastrophes that leave scars, this change arrived slowly enough to be normalized. Shorelines shifted by meters, then kilometers. River valleys widened into estuaries. Lowlands transformed into marsh. What had once been distant humidity became encroaching sea air. Entire ecosystems migrated inland, carrying humans with them. But migration has limits. As the ocean advanced, it fractured the land. Continuous forests became isolated pockets. River systems broke apart. Human groups that had once shared resources and routes found themselves separated by water that grew wider each generation. Over time, a single population became many, divided, not by culture, but by geography that no longer existed. This fragmentation matters, because it explains something that has puzzled researchers for decades. Across Southeast Asia and Australia, ancient human populations show signs of sudden separation, genetic divergence. Without clear cultural conflict, the sea, not war, appears to be the dividing force. By the time the ocean stabilized, Sunda was gone. In its place stood islands, and on those islands lived people who remembered forests where waves now crashed. But memory does not survive water very well. Unlike desert civilizations that leave stone and bone behind, Sunda's people lived in organic worlds. Wood, fiber, earth, their homes dissolved, their tools sank, their roads vanished. The sea did not bury them, it scattered them. This is why Sunda does not appear in myth the way Atlantis does. There was no single moment of destruction to memorialize, no final night, no divine punishment. Just a long retreat from a homeland that could never be revisited. By the time writing appeared in the region, the geography had already been rewritten, which leads to a disturbing realization. If one of the largest inhabited landscapes on Earth could disappear without leaving a clear cultural echo, then human history is not missing a few chapters. It may be missing entire volumes. And part 2 begins with what happens after a world vanishes, when humans rebuild on land that feels unfamiliar, unstable, and wrong. What humanity became after the flooded world when land disappears? People do not just lose territory, they lose orientation. And when orientation is lost, culture changes in ways that archaeology rarely knows how to measure. After the flooding of the Sunda Shelf, humanity entered a new phase, one defined not by expansion, but by confinement. Populations that once moved freely across vast interiors now lived pressed against coastlines and islands. Resources became finite, space became negotiated. The sea, once distant, became unavoidable. This was not a minor adjustment. It fundamentally altered how humans related to their environment. For the first time, the ocean was no longer background. It was boundary. Communities that had once relied on forests and rivers were forced to adapt to shorelines. Fishing replaced hunting. Boats replaced footpaths. Navigation replaced memory. And with this shift came new risks: storms, tides, isolation that reshaped social structures from the inside out. Evidence suggests that this period saw an explosion of maritime innovation, not because humans suddenly became curious, but because survival demanded it. Open water separated families. Crossing it became essential. This is how seafaring cultures are born, not from ambition, but from necessity. And necessity leaves fingerprints. Across the islands of Southeast Asia, we find early evidence of long-distance travel, trade networks, and shared symbolic behavior emerging shortly after sea levels stabilized. These societies were no longer inland cultures adapting to water. They were coastal cultures defined by it. But adaptation has a cost. When land fragments, knowledge fragments with it, techniques evolve in isolation, beliefs diverge, languages split. What once was a shared cultural memory becomes localized tradition. Over time, the original world becomes unrecognizable, not because it is forgotten, but because it is reinterpreted. This may explain why flood myths appear globally but never agree. They are not records, they are distortions. Each one a broken reflection of a real experience filtered through generations who no longer understood the geography their ancestors described. In this sense, the flooded world did not vanish. It dissolved into stories, rituals, instincts, and fears that survived long after the land itself was gone. What is most unsettling is not that humans survived this transformation, but how thoroughly they normalized it. Within a few thousand years, coastlines felt permanent again. The sea acquired borders, maps stabilized. The idea that entire continents could disappear faded from collective awareness. And yet, the planet has not changed its behavior. The same processes that erased Sunda warming, melting, rising seas are not ancient anomalies. They are recurring features of Earth's climate system. The difference now is not vulnerability, but arrogance. The drowned worlds of prehistory are not warnings carved into stone. They are warnings written into absence. They tell us that civilization does not always fall loudly. Sometimes it simply relocates, adapts, and forgets what it lost. Beneath the oceans lie landscapes that once felt permanent to the people who lived on them. They planned futures there. They raised children there. They assumed the ground beneath their feet would remain. It didn't, and the sea is very good at keeping secrets.